10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff, and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And as we notice a new Kerbal on our load screen, it's time for Kerbalcast, episode 48, Kerbal Space Program 1.0. I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and with me as always my CMP, Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
Coming up in today's program, Maxmaps from Squad joins us to talk about 1.0.
What do you think about 1.0? Find out in the mission briefing featuring your letters and tweets.
And Freetoss joins us live on Kerbalcast with 1.0 aerodynamics.
And we get an audio letter from Thomas Eccles.
1.0 is finally here.
Yeah.
Yay. I've been playing
We're relevant again.
We're relevant again. I've been playing it all week.
Yeah.
I know that you've been gone. You just got your hands on it, last night?
Last night I got back from being out of town.
Wow.
And I got a couple hours with it, you know. It was like I busted in the door, I dropped my luggage bag, and my girlfriend was walking toward me and was like, No time.
Time
Time to Kerbal.
No kisses, honey.
Yeah.
Got a Kerbal.
Don't even touch me. I'm focused on this.
You are dedicated to the cause.
Yeah. So,
Well,
needless to say, I got a lot more time playing it from the couch.
Yeah,
So,
I would imagine you did. And it was much colder, I bet.
yeah.
Well, let's bring in somebody who is truly dedicated to the cause. We have always done in the past LMP and CMP, Lunar Module Pilot and Command Module Pilot. The Apollo missions had a third position, the Mission Commander, the CDR. And so for the very first time ever on Kerbalcast, we are going to have a Mission Commander, a CDR, and it is Maxmaps from Squad.
Oh my God, guys! I'm both humbled and horrified by this.
There you go. Well,
by this. Oh my God!
Well, give us an order.
Try and bring this show down steady, please. Oh my God! I don't think I'm qualified for this, but I'm giving it my best.
Well, the problem is we have trouble getting the show off the ground. So
Yeah.
So, well, listen. I can imagine that this has been an incredible week for you. The culmination of a lot of work. How do you feel?
I am equal parts absolutely excited and absolutely exhausted. The past 2 months have been absolutely just nuts crazy with work over at Squad HQ trying to get everything down. You know, thankfully we don't have a publisher or anyone breathing down our necks, so we could just technically release when we wanted. But we kind of set up a deadline for ourselves and said, okay, the patch has to be out by this date, and then we kind of pushed that date over a month and a half.
And just to be clear, you're sitting on a beach in Cozumel right now.
Oh, no, I'm in my Mexico City apartment. We will be resting next week. We have a plan. We're going to bring the rest of the Kerbal team over to Mexico City. And we're going to just kind of chill for a week, go see the Avengers, do a bunch of nerdy stuff. And then next Saturday, we will be jumping out of a plane, but with a parachute.
Are you?
Oh,
really?
I'm glad you included the parachute part.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be very careful to forget it at the very last moment, but we kind of want to keep working in the game. So.
Yeah.
So, is this meant to be research into aerodynamics?
I think we can bill it as that. Why not? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Kerbal skydiving.
Yeah, Kerbal skydiving program. We'll see how it works out. If there's video, we'll post it everywhere just so everyone can see my face of absolute panic. I almost went skydiving once years ago, and then everyone involved, myself included, chickened out, and we just went on dune buggies instead. But hopefully this time everyone will be happy enough to push me over.
Yeah.
You know, you just described to me what I've always assumed life at an indie game developer company was like. You guys work real hard, you push the game out the door, and then to celebrate, you go see the Avengers and you skydive.
Pretty much. We are just... I've seen pictures of release parties for games and all that where, it's a bunch of guys getting drunk and that kind of stuff. And yeah, we'll probably do a little bit of that, but really just want to do nerdy stuff together.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect before you jump out of a plane, you're probably all going to need to be drunk anyway. So.
Yeah, just a little bit. And yeah, we were planning out the week, what are we going to do? And obviously when we're going skydiving, we're going to have to be away from Mexico City for a while. So we rented out this lovely house. And the first question I get from the team is, are you certain it has Wi-Fi? We're going to this paradise place, excellent temperatures, giant lake in front of it. The house has 2 pools, a game room. It's a fantastic place. And the first question I get is, are you sure it has Wi-Fi? Come on, guys.
They're nerd game developers. What do you expect?
Absolutely. I say this sitting in front of my battle station, just wondering just what game am I going to get to this weekend.
Yeah. You actually have time to do that now.
Yeah, I finally have time to do that after 2 months of working really hard for a long, long time.
Well, and Maxmaps is an old school gamer. You like the retro gaming.
Oh, I do a lot. I've been I kind of bought Shovel Knight months ago, and I was gonna play this once we actually have the game out.
Is that the first thing on your list to play?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm gonna go to. But also, kind of since we tweaked a bunch of stuff in 1.01 and 1.02 just yesterday, I kind of want to play for a little while and give it a whirl, because we changed the drag a little bit. We're trying different stuff. We might even change it again on Monday. Hopefully not. I think we finally nailed it.
Speaking of trying different stuff, what kind of different stuff are you trying?
Basically, the thing is, we've changed the way the physics are controlled in the game, so it all links to a CFG file within the game. So we've had literally hundreds of people send us their option of what the best aerodynamics possible is. So we've been running through the gamut and figuring out, okay, this one's better because of this. No, these numbers are better because of that. No, but this just feels better. So I guess the beauty of making that system is that we are now overflowing with options, and we might just come up with like a bunch of sliders or suggestions like, okay, this is realistic settings, this is arcade settings, etc., etc.
Well, I think you've already had, as we record this, I think you've had, 2 bug fixes already?
Yeah, the first one was we added a couple things that we didn't have time to, but we figured, hey, we can get them on later in the week, like the fact that the parts will now start to show an overlay that tells you how hot they are, so they don't just randomly explode, which I think is important. And then once we actually got 1.0.1 out of the door, we were like, okay, that's great. And then we realized that, we added the system that lets you radiate heat when you're in a liquid way faster than when you're in just in the atmosphere. Technically, the atmosphere is a liquid, but traditional definition of a liquid. We're like, okay, yeah, that works great. And then we realized that it was kind of working backwards, and the craft were absorbing heat from the water and exploding. So we turned every sea into magma by mistake. So we had 30 minutes to fix it.
Yeah, I could see that developing into a slight issue.
Magma. Yeah, I think Nos wasn't far off. The game did turn into Minecraft.
Yeah, we're like, okay, splash down. Yeah, look, the heat's changing. Oh, God, it's going the other way.
Well, let's, obviously 1.0, I think it's safe to say this is probably one of the biggest releases you guys have done. And you've done a lot. Can you go through and tell me, what's some of the new stuff in 1.0?
Well, for starters, the retooling of the physics model has absolutely just redone the game. We basically had this item, which is on our list for design, which was, let's fix the aerodynamics, right? And that turned into the largest development job we have simply overtaken. It is huge. Every single aspect has to go. It's okay, how do we fix the aerodynamics? Well, they need to be more realistic, yes. They need to be more intuitive, which means more realism, because, if the planes should behave like they do in real life, yes. Drag should behave like how it does in real life. Okay, are we gonna do that? Yes. Okay, if drag's gonna behave the way it's gonna behave, the way it behaves in real life, it's going to generate friction. Okay, so we're gonna need convection hitting it. Okay, so we might as well do re-entry effects, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And that's kind of one of the reasons why the release date got pushed back a month and a half.
That was another thing I wasn't expecting. You guys don't usually do release dates, but you gave us one this time. What was the thought process behind that?
Basically, we were nailing ourselves to it in front of the eyes of the community, so we went to it. You
said we're going to give ourselves a hard, fast date, so we have to actually do this.
We pushed it back, just okay, let's add a little tomorrow. Okay, push it back. And at some point, we were like, okay, we're going to tell the community when it's coming out through riddles and everything, and it'll be loads of fun to do. But we're going to tell them, so we can't back out this time.
So, with the the changes in release date and the features being added, how much has the community response to the previous updates changed the updates that you're coming out with now?
Well, the community response, well, people seem to so far be incredibly pleased with the general size of the update and the polish that we actually managed to get it to. People are really happy with. Yeah, we had to do a couple bug fixes. The community was skeptical about our move to 1.0. People were worried, like, oh my god, it's going to be so incomplete, reviews are going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. We heard a lot of that in our forums, and people concerned that we were going to tarnish our reputation after doing so well in early access. But just looking at the community reaction so far, I can happily tell that hasn't actually happened. We were right to believe in ourselves and just do our absolute best for, what was it, 3 months since we delivered the last one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've said this on the podcast in previous episodes. You guys handled the pre-release hype exactly right, because by the time it actually came out, I was drooling on myself. Just, I was like 1.0, I can't wait. So you guys did a good job with managing the hype.
Oh no, it's been like that's something that's been sort of a learning process for me since I joined Squad. I'd had to figure out what was the best way. Like a couple, I don't know, like 3 releases ago, we gave pre-release copies too early, and that when people were streaming, and it turned into a bad sentiment because people went like, why does this person have it and I don't? So over time, I just kind of had to figure out what's the right schedule for our community for them to know, like, when do they get pictures? When do they get video? When do we even start teasing out features? When do we release the large game plan for it? And I think it panned out this time. We had the community at a boil and ready by the time we hit that big red button at HQ that launches the next release.
What are you hearing in terms of response? Obviously, a lot of talk on the forums. Is there a consistent message that you're hearing over and over?
A lot of people are saying this is great. There's a subset of people saying this is great, comma, please add more. And then there's like the tiny percent of people who are upset about everything all the time, which is, the internet.
Of them saying add more, is there anything they're looking for and anything that you plan on bringing out?
There are certainly things we're planning on adding. Like, for example, there were some things that we couldn't put into this release. 3 things to be precise, because they just weren't up to the new standards of quality that we are holding ourselves to. Number 1, we didn't get the tier 0 buildings in, like the super low tech ones, because we figured we needed, like, they needed way more work. We are trying to get them to perfection, so we figured, okay, tier 0 buildings, those are going to have to wait until 1.1. Then we had this overlay planned that was going to show you, if you had a scientist or an engineer, it was going to show you different UI elements to tell you, like, what biome are you over, or how much delta V your rocket has, that kind of stuff. And we tried several designs for it, and none of them looked visually appealing or even like interesting and easy to understand. So we had to just redo them over and over, and they just weren't ready. And what was the third one? We had that, and and the aerodynamic overlay. We had this thing that was going to go over the space plane hangar, and you were going to be able to, like, it was like a spherical overlay over your space plane that would tell you, like, at which angles it's behaving better, which ones are worse, and that was one of those features that just eats a lot of time, and the more time you put into it, the more time you can put into it. So we figured, okay, let's hold that one and just make it perfect for 1.1. So we already have those 3 things, plus upgrading to Unity 5, plus working on the 64-bit, plus a couple more things we are kind of cooking, but we're not quite ready to share yet.
You sent out a tweet several weeks ago saying that there were some things you were dropping out of it. Is that the 3 that you just mentioned? Is that what you were talking about?
Yes. And we figure, okay, if we're going to drop those because we're simply not, we're not nailing the design and we're not happy with how they're working, we need to add more stuff. So we added a bunch more stuff, like all the new parts and functionalities for the resource system. I don't know. I actually kind of mean to ask this to you guys. What's your favorite part so far?
My favorite part is resource collecting. I'm having a lot of fun with that. I love the fact that as a matter of fact, I was before we got recording today, I was telling Nos one of the first things I did was I built a self-sustaining ship, and
nice.
I sent it to the Mun. And when I got there and I got into orbit, I had no more fuel left, but I had an automated drill lander that landed, collected ore, came back, and I refined enough fuel to get me back to Kerbin. And I learned enough from that mission to where I'm wanting to create a more efficient self-sustaining ship, and I would like to see if I can go from planet to planet just on resource collecting.
That is literally something we discussed during production, like the fact that if someone gets smart enough and clever enough with their design, they can do a grand tour of the Kerbal system, planet by planet, just landing in the right spot and refueling.
That's kind of what I'm looking at. I would love, to me, that's the stuff of science fiction, a self, an
infinite mission.
Yeah, an infinite mission. I would like to try and see how many planets I can hit without having to go back to Kerbin. But see, that has opened up a whole new aspect of gameplay. Nos, what so far? What's been your favorite part?
I always play in career, so starting off in career, I have noticed changes in the way the game handles and different features like the aerodynamics model. The different contracts have been interesting, and the things that I've liked are the milestones not being contracts themselves, but being achievements that you get as you play. I thought that was a very good change.
We figured out the early game was getting a little too grindy, since the most efficient way to go through it was to stop your missions and then go back and stop it and then go back and stop every time you hit a new milestone. So we figured if we made those automatic, it would just let people go as fast or as slow as they would prefer without punishing them by receiving less funds just because they went too high.
This is a tiny little detail question, but I'm curious. The Mark I capsule used to have a built-in heat shield. It no longer does, correct?
It has a little more heat tolerance than normal, but with the new atmosphere, it will absolutely need a heat shield to survive a very fast re-entry. Unless you're, I don't know if you guys saw Squadcast last night, but I kind of did what I have christened a rotisserie re-entry. Where I didn't have a heat shield, but I managed to get my rocket spinning.
Yeah.
Like a rotisserie chicken, so different parts would be, exposed to the heat at different moments while it spun down, and it just barely managed to save me without a heat shield.
Yeah, the Apollo program called that the barbecue roll.
Yeah, no, I kind of had to do the same thing for my rocket, but now, unless you want to do silly stuff like that, you will absolutely need something like you will need a heat shield to get through the atmosphere now.
Yeah, the first time I sent a Mark I capsule up and back, I had not put a heat shield on it, and this is after 1.0 came out. And the thing that really surprised me was my parachutes started overheating. Yeah, I have never seen that.
Yeah, that's we added the conduction heating to the game. So if your pod gets really, really hot, it will transmit heat up, and parts that are more up or down or all around. Parts that are way less heat resistant than your pod, if you let it get too hot, will explode just because they've absorbed the heat.
For career mode, now since you have to buy extra things like heat shields in order to counter new effects, did you have to change cost balancing for them spending funds in order to get those extra things?
Yes, we actually had we went through the rebalance of everything. A lot of parts had their values changed. A lot of contracts had their payouts upped. We basically had to do two rebalances of the game. We had to do an economic rebalance where we looked at everything that deals with economics and the currencies within the game, and we had to do a physics rebalance, which was balance rebalance, I guess. Which was okay, maybe this engine has a little too much ISP. No, maybe this engine is too expensive, or this fuel tank doesn't actually hold as much as its volume, so we gotta fix that. So yeah, while adding heat shields is a little more expensive, in general, the game is made to compensate for those little extra costs.
Okay, also in the career mode, which for Sandbox, if anyone joins Sandbox, they know they have access to everything, and for Science mode, they have access to everything, they just collect science. With career mode, that may be many people's first introduction to the game. Exactly. What thoughts went into what features would be accessed in normal mode? Because many players, when they start off, they just see difficulty normal and would start with that. So in order to get that at a normal balance, what did you leave out and what did you add in?
We had to make normal a little more forgiving than it was before. Like in general, mostly via controlling the payouts from the contracts and doing things like letting you, if someone just break several records at once, they get a large payout. So they kind of have a buffer zone when they begin where they will be bombarded with easy money before the game actually starts getting hard on them. Now, as far as the introduction, as you can probably noticed, we absolutely redid the entire tech tree. We just changed every single part of where it was. A lot of them didn't move. A lot of them, well, basically we had to consider every single one, and we ended up moving a lot of them, plus adding new ones. The very first node, the Tier 0 node, now has that tiny flea solid rocket booster, which we figured, hey, this is a great way to just learn how to control the ship. We worked a lot. We worked hard on our what it's called the first hour experience of the game, where we just make sure that everything in career mode for the first hour was just like super clear towards what you had to do, even if you only went through one tutorial or none at all.
Whenever you were testing out, anytime you made an update, did you get brand new players to play on the normal mode?
Oh, absolutely. I am certain our friends and families are just sick of us asking for help. We keep going through the community. Like, there's something I will always do, and I keep doing nonstop. I have a Twitch name that is on the Maxmaps, and I just go on Twitch streams, and whenever I find someone just learning Kerbal, just starting to learn Kerbal, I will, even if they have like 1 or 2 viewers, I'll just sit there and watch and take notes.
With the game being in early access for so long, and it's hit multiple Steam sales and brought in a lot of new people, do you feel like you may have already resource mined most of the people that would be interested in Kerbal Space Program, or do you think it'll be more widespread and anyone who's been waiting on it will be ready for it?
Well, if anything, release has shown us that a lot of people were waiting for us to leave early access. We're not sure if we have hit our market cap quite yet. Our numbers are still growing at a decent rate, but I don't think we're at that number yet, but it's something we can maybe hit in the future. However, we're doing our best to just broaden our base without compromising the game. Just trying to make sure that everyone who could play KSP and is interested in it has at least heard of it.
Well, I have a feeling that given the media response to the 1.0 release, you're probably going to see a bump in people that have never played the game that are suddenly being... Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about the aerodynamics upgrades that you guys did in 1.0. One thing I want to point out, and because I was just astonished at little things, you guys did some real polish on graphics. When rockets launch now, you have smoke coming out of the channels. When you land on the Mun, dust flies everywhere. In addition to upgrading the aerodynamics, you guys really went in and did a graphics polish.
Yeah, we fixed. We actually changed a couple of shaders within the game, so if things look different, guys, that's because of it. Plus, we did the thing with the emissives based on engine thrust. Like, I don't know if you tried just setting a bunch of engines on the launch pad and firing them off with infinite fuel while still clamped to launch clamps. You can get a massive amount of smoke that way. So it basically the system responds to how much thrust you're actually putting towards the ground is how much dust and smoke you'll kick up.
I haven't done that, but the minute I hang up, that's the first thing I'm going to do now.
Yeah, that's basically like when I was testing that system, I was just like, okay, here's a pod, and here's 20 of the largest engines I could put, infinite fuel, fire, whoosh.
One thing, you're talking about the VAB, one little tweak that you guys added that I absolutely love is now when you build and save a ship, there's a tiny little picture of it.
Yes, we actually heard a lot about that. People were, it was a problem for some people in the community, myself included, that whenever I don't really come up with naming schemes for my ships as much as I just think of something funny and write it down every time I make a new ship, which means that 2 weeks later, I don't remember what all of my ships do.
See, I was having the exact same problem, and now being able to actually look at the ship. That was just, it's just little tiny things like that add up to a really good release.
And that's kind of the beauty of now being 1.0 and no longer being in beta. We have kind of become modders of our own game. We just happen to know all the systems. So we can just do little things like that nonstop and keep adding not so gigantic features, but small stuff, cool stuff throughout the next couple or 3. I don't know how many more we're going to do. We kind of have to be absolutely happy with the game before we even move into whatever maybe next. So you can expect good things coming in 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. and we can expect a lot more polish. This is something I've said before, but I'm happy to repeat it. We see 1.0 as us achieving every goal set in the original design document of Kerbal. Not the super original one, because the original one didn't even have a third dimension. The ones once we realized the game was happening, the one we wrote then. Everything that comes after this is basically us saying thanks to the fans for letting us go on this crazy journey.
Well, tell me a little bit about what's coming down the pike. When is 60? Where are you at on 64-bit? And can you talk a little bit about multiplayer?
Okay, multiplayer has been in development since we announced it at the end of 2013. It's a massive undertaking. There's what we have in so far for multiplayer. We have just about everything required for the internet connection and the back of the system. Like the server is working, the connection's working, the games are communicating. Now what we have to do is implementation and design work, which is technically, code-wise, it's the lighter part of implementing multiplayer, but design can take forever. We have to figure out so much about what we allow, what we don't allow, how things work. Do we want to limit physics significance of vessels because of the part counts, or will bumping to 64-bit and not really bumping to 64-bit, but bumping to Unity 5, since it allows multi-threading on physics for your processor? Will that be enough of a resource bump for you to not need to worry about how many parts your friends put in their spaceships? So it's a lot of design that we have to nail down, and that's actually part of the plans for our meetings over the week, since we're bringing the whole team down. We have to figure out.
We've had a lot of our listeners theorizing on how it could be done, but have you found out how you wanted to do time warp in multiplayer?
Oh, absolutely. We want everyone to be in a... Technically, since we've given the player control over time, we want everyone to be a time traveler, but only really having the capacity to go towards the future. So, like, let's say I am in low Kerbal orbit, and I fast forward my time, 10 years in the future. Like, I just hit the time warp to max, and I go up 10 years. And a new player joins the server. Well, no, I'm explaining the system wrong. 2 players join the server at the same time. 1 player time warps ahead 10 years. They are in the exact same spot in low Kerbal orbit, but one is 10 years in the future. So the other player is asked, hey, your friend is 10 years in the future. Would you like to sync up to him? And then the game will time warp you forward, and you'll be moved a few meters away so you don't immediately collide into him. And you will be brought to the same time. So you can always, the game will prompt you if you want to catch up if you're far behind. So if you send a Joule mission and then you land and you start setting up a space station in Joule and you want your friends to come along, they can all send missions and then sync up to your timeline to make sure that everyone arrives there at the same time.
So this begs the question, if the player that was behind in the timeline were to change something, would it change something for the person 10 years ahead?
No. Here's the thing, you basically have your control over your ships. It will bring all your vessels over 10 years. So, everything if that guy has a space station and a rover going around Duna and that vessel by the guy at low Kerbal orbit, they would all be brought 10 years in the future.
So does each player has their own instance of the game running? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes.
Let's say you've got 2 people in orbit and one person goes 10 years into the future. How does that other player appear to the person that's 10 years back?
Oh, they will know that they are connected on the server, but they will no longer be able to see their vessel because they will not be synchronized at the same time.
Okay, so you're kind of using the fact that distance is a big factor in the game. You don't really see things until you're right on top of them, and
exactly,
you're kind of using that as a way to get around that.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Mind you, I want to obviously clarify that none of this design is final, and once we actually try it, if it's not fun enough, we'll change it. But for now, that's kind of the way we're going.
Well, we've had all kinds of speculation, all the way down to a dungeon master who's controlling the time.
That would be pretty neat, actually. And there's things we have to design and make decisions on, how exactly do we regulate player behavior? Do we want someone to be able to clamp a bunch of boosters to your station and deorbit it? Do we want to be able to lock it? Do we have to just let people decide who gets on their server and if they trust them? Or do we need to put in mechanisms to protect your vessels, that kind of stuff?
I know you guys said that you will never introduce weapons into the game. I can't help but think the minute you go multiplayer, somebody's going to come up with a weapons mod.
Oh no, multiplayer. That's something that's super important to set down. Multiplayer will be moddable. So if someone wants to have a World War server where everyone's just going out for each other and they put in like the armory mods in, if that's the experience they want on that server, it's entirely up to them.
Wow, I guess that'll be the space debris mod.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I actually tried logging into a couple KMP servers while just testing multiplayer in general, and like there was a server, I can't remember where I found it, but a group of players there had enacted a no-fly zone over KSC. So anyone who would launch would immediately take a booster or a very poorly constructed plane to their vessel. And I was like, I guess if you give people freedom, they can do anything.
Yeah. I guess that's one way to enforce the rules.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to ask you a question, 'cause since we're wrapping this up. You asked us early, what is our favorite part of 1.0? What's your favorite part so far?
My favorite part so far has to be the way we set up progression for career mode. I think we nailed it really well, at least in my opinion. It's really enjoyable. And the fact that most of the grind is gone and the fact that the contracts are far more balanced and there's no variety, I've been just doing missions on my own and challenging myself. And it's just incredibly entertaining. Mind you, though, I pretty much love everything in this patch, from something as simple as adding female Kerbals to something as complex as the way the re-entry hit effects work now. It feels like a whole new game, and I love it because of it.
So with it being at its 1.0, and well, actually
1.0
number to be announced later. Do you guys have anything else beyond Kerbal planned?
Oh God, no. We are for the nearby future and short term, and maybe even long term. We want to keep adding stuff to Kerbal.
I know what's going to happen. Maxmaps is going to start doing retro. You're going to start creating retro games.
No, as much as I adore retro gaming, I think we kind of are in love with the Kerbals, and we love how they behave and interact with each other. So if we ever undertook another project, it would probably have to be Kerbal related.
How about
it? Joke around in the office about Kerbal racing or Kerbal aviation program, or just something silly with vehicles, like some Mario Kart kind of thing, because we were always playing Mario Kart during our lunch breaks. But it's way too early. For now, all I can say is Kerbal Space Program. We're working on it for quite a while now, and we're going to keep working at it. We have multiplayer to deliver, we have more updates to deliver, and we have some cool stuff in the future, which we are not really in a position to share, but it's going to be interesting.
Well, how about a 2D side-scroller Super Jeb World? or Super Kerman Brothers?
I think I have heard similar stuff before. I'm not 100% sure, but mind you, the guys would look pretty cute.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
To climb and jump, well.
I'm excited about Kerbal Kart.
Yeah, Kerbal Kart. Yeah, well, of course, rollies. Well, listen, I want to say you guys have done a fantastic job with 1.0. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Please tell everybody at Squad how much we're enjoying it. And thank you for coming on the program. I would urge you to keep listening. We have a lot of letters coming up. Listeners, their opinion of 1.0, and it's a big old pile of praise, so I think you will enjoy that.
I am definitely going to stick around. I want to hear all of them.
Let's kind of start with our take on 1.0. As we said a little while ago, you've only had a little bit of time with 1.0. What do you think?
In customary tradition, anytime there's an update, I start a brand new career file.
Okay.
So it's hard saying goodbye to the previous one, because I just got my Minmus probe and I'd done a lot in there, and so this one it's starting straight from scratch. I noticed some big changes. First one is there were very few contracts in the beginning. There were the starting 4 like there were before, but whenever I launched, I got milestone achievements, which is something we talked about for a while, because and Maxmaps had just talked about that if you wanted to get to 5,000, if you happen to go 10,000, then you missed out on the 10,000 actually being available. So now there are achievements, which actually gave a lot of drive, especially the speed records and distance, to make the biggest thing I possibly could, which goes straight back into the spirit of the game. The very first thing I did whenever I started the game the very first time is I put as much stuff as I could just to launch this crazy rocket. And so launching this big thing and seeing like all these meters tick, like this far, this far, this far, this fast, it was exciting. It was real exciting to just see how much it would tick up.
I got to say, one thing that Maxmaps said when he was talking to us that I was very impressed with was he said they went back and looked at career and they felt like it was too grindy.
Yeah.
And, the fact that they would do that, I thought was very impressive.
Yeah, and they were all good changes. And taking off all those milestones without having to go to the administration building and get a new contract and then establish that contract, complete it, then go back and get another one. Getting those milestones was enough quick cash that you felt like you were actually, you weren't being distracted from doing the big contracts. And then after the basics were completed and they unlocked new ones, I like how thematic some of them were getting, because there were contracts like, escort so-and-so Kerman to this place, or, it's like give them a tour of this area. And so I thought it was really cute, like
almost like it had more of a narrative.
Yeah, definitely. And the aerodynamics model is very different. It actually mattered. I was using nose cones. I don't remember the last time I ever used a nose cone, besides just making it aesthetically pleasing.
That was when I started playing 1.0, the first thought I had was, I wonder how NOS is going to feel about this, because, literally right off the launch pad, you notice a difference.
Yeah. There is more of a challenge to it. I do wonder if, I'd asked him about what goes into deciding what normal mode is. Mm-hmm. And this adds a bit difficulty to normal mode. I wonder if somebody new, they just see that as part of the process, or if they see it as something that's a little bit hard to overcome. For me, it's just taking a little bit of tweaking. Like, I'm not going into orbit as fast as I would have. I'm having to spend a little bit more time in the atmosphere trying to get used to it. But I think some of the contracts that I'm doing for science, so I can unlock more aerodynamic, more fins and wings, and ability to steer, which is something I didn't focus on at all in previous career mode plays.
I use Kerbal Engineer, and it'll show me my thrust to weight ratio as I'm going up. For someone who's not using it, I have found that if I start going over, my experience is that if I go over 2.0 as far as thrust to weight, or 2-to-1 thrust to weight, that's when I start getting into trouble.
Yeah.
There is a visual reference you can use, which is when you start going over 2-to-1 on thrust to weight, that's generally when you'll start seeing aerodynamic effects visually around your ship. Without Kerbal Engineer, if you start seeing that, you can back off the throttle a little bit and bring yourself back down.
Yeah.
And it's more efficient too. There is a point at which you get very diminishing returns. But have you done any re-entry yet?
Some minor from suborbitals.
Okay.
And as heat shields were given pretty early, so I just kind of figured I needed to use them. There were it's a little bit more harsh when you land, because before I was able to land with the basic parachute, the command pod, and a Science Junior. Well, I tried landing like that, and the Science Junior got destroyed when it touched ground. Like, re-entry, it was okay, but when it touched ground, it took the damage. So I'm wondering how much, besides just heat shield, how much shock absorption a heat shield provides.
That's one big thing I've noticed about 1.0. I used to be able to I could bring a capsule in with things on the side of it, like solar panels or goo capsules or whatever, or antennas. Anything that's on your capsule when you come in is going to get torn off now.
Yeah.
That's been my experience. The other thing I've noticed, you actually have to fly the re-entry now.
Yeah.
It used to be you could just turn SAS off and the craft would orient itself retrograde. It doesn't do that anymore. Now it will sag. And that's, from a realism point of view, that's actually not quite accurate. The whole reason that the space program uses capsules, one of the designers this is space history going way back, but one of the engineers was a man by the name of Max Faget, and he said we need to use capsules because capsules aerodynamically automatically orient themselves retrograde. So realistically, you shouldn't have to fly that, but I do like that it adds an additional challenge.
Yeah.
Because you really do now. I mean, it isn't, re-entry is no longer a matter of just sitting back and watching. Now, I mean, you're literally using your WASD keys to keep yourself oriented all the way in. And re-entry heat makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. It does make a massive difference. I also noticed upon landing, everything's way more detailed. Mm-hmm. Like if you watch the slope of the beach going into the ocean, there's actually detail there. It's not just this blue drop off. And your Kerbals can they actually swim around.
That was the first time they were able to actually get out and swim. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm not used to this. Also, have you noticed there seems to be more detail on the ships themselves?
Yeah, I did notice that. Opening up a Science Junior and just looking around on the ships. Yeah, there's a lot more detail. It looks very good.
This is a very polished.
Yeah.
Very polished game.
Very, very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. I have to say, as I was playing the game, I was making notes, and I've already some of these I've already talked about with Maxmaps, but the ones that I did not say to him, it looks to me like KSC and the island landing strip. When you go over them in orbit at night, from what I can tell, it looks like they're lit up.
Yeah,
you could always see them from orbit, but now you can actually see lights, which is something I have not noticed before. If it has been there in the past, I have not noticed it. But I see lights now. The other thing, and we just talked about this, if your G-forces go into the red on re-entry, your capsule will now blow up. That actually matters. I mentioned to Maxmaps, the first time I brought a Mark I capsule in, the parachute started overheating. And I mean, they were right on the edge. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was actually panicking. I was thinking, I may lose my very first Kerbal in 1.0 because I may not have parachutes here in a minute. Let's see. I already talked about we don't center on retrograde. Also, I noticed the new fairings. Once you have jettisoned your fairings, you have all these little bits and pieces that are floating. You get this huge debris cloud around you. If you hit time warp, and this may change, but after you jettison your fairings, if you hit time warp, they all automatically disappear. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was kind of funny because you can be in a huge crowded cloud of debris, hit time warp, and boom, you're completely clear skies.
Yeah.
If that had happened in the movie Gravity, it would have been a very short movie.
Yeah, it would have been solved pretty easily.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, well, let's just hit...
just hit time warp, just tap it and untap it, and we're good.
The other thing I have noticed, I was using Deadly Re-Entry, and I had discovered that if I would put my periapsis at about 35 kilometers, that would bring me in. It wouldn't max me out on G-force. It would slow me down. That seemed to be the sweet spot. Now, the sweet spot seems to be about -1 periapsis. Mm-hmm. Get just a little bit of a negative periapsis, and that seems to be the best. Because when I did a 35 periapsis re-entry, it blew up my capsule. It was too much heating for too long, and it overheated it. A couple of bugs a possible bug I ran into. When I do an EVA in the Kerbal system, Jeb gets out of the capsule, flies around, comes back to the capsule, F key, grabs on, no problem, hit the B key, and he boards. No problem. When I was in science mode, I did the thing where I went out into solar orbit and ran experiments.
Yeah.
When I brought Jeb back from the EVA, every time I would get to the capsule and hit the F key to grab, it would throw him off into space. What I finally ended up doing, he would never grab he'd never grab the ladder. It's like he'd grab the ladder and push off.
Yeah.
What I finally ended up doing was, once I got him close enough, it would give you the option of F for grab or B for board.
And you just board.
Yeah, board. I don't know if that's a bug, but the EVA behavior seems to change in solar orbit versus planetary orbit. Also, there was one time when I noticed some sound clipping during a rendezvous. It was like there was some background noise that was just going, it was just dropping in at regular intervals. So I don't know if those are actual bugs,
or just things you happen to experience,
but just things I happened to notice. Beyond what we've talked about, anything else about 1.0?
I think that's most of it from what I've seen so far.
Okay.
It's been interesting. It's been different, but so far I haven't had anything that just bothers me.
Okay.
Like everything I've enjoyed so far.
Well, Freetoss, who does space planes and the Freetoss Flight Fundamentals segment, obviously spends a lot more time in atmosphere than we do. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to see what he thought about the new aerodynamics modeling. So we asked him to join us at this point and kind of talk about the new aerodynamics model in KSP 1.0.
So we got Freetoss on the line. How you doing?
Pretty good. I think that you have a little bit of high praise to call me an expert, but
Yeah.
we'll roll with it.
Yeah, you're the best we got. So
Wow.
Well, tell us, you spend a lot of time, obviously, since you like to do space planes and that sort of thing, you spend a lot more time in the atmosphere than we do.
Right.
And they did a lot of atmospheric tweaks with 1.0. What are your thoughts?
They did. Personally, I think that it's great. It's an interesting mix between what old Ferrum Aerospace was like and what old stock was like. And the reason that I say that is because previously it used to be that the stock aerodynamics in 0.90 or before was very soupy, was the term that was always thrown out. The drag wasn't modeled very well, and it was really thick. It slowed you down a lot more versus Ferrum, which let you go much faster and was modeled more correctly and allowed for things like aerodynamic damage and hypersonic effects and things like that. So now what's happened is KSP's 1.0 stock has folded in some of the aspects of Ferrum, such as damage, a more correct drag model, more correct lift model, things like that. But at the same time, the air still feels thicker than it does with old Ferrum. And the reason that I say that is because things like drag are way stronger in 1.0 stock compared to 0.90 Ferrum. So it's even more important than it was in FAR to have nose cones, to have fairings on your rockets, to have sleek and a low profile for your planes in order to fight the drag. And what's interesting is normally in old Ferrum, the best way to rip off your wings was to try and make a very high speed turn at close to Mach 1. The same is true now in stock 1.0, except you can get away with a little bit more in stock than you could in old Ferrum. The difference, though, is that if you make that turn, because you turn the flat face of your aircraft into the airstream, the really high drag coefficients will kill all of your speed. So you might go into your turn going really fast, but it's like immediately putting on the brakes, and you might lose a good 100 meters per second of speed just by making that turn, which is significantly higher than in old Ferrum.
What is, in your experience so far, what is more realistic aerodynamic modeling, 1.0 or FAR?
FAR.
Yeah.
I would still say FAR. And I know that Ferrum is currently working on an update that is being called New FAR, which is underway and has a totally different modeling system. Like, they're using voxels and things. I'm not exactly sure how that will work, but it's supposed to become even more realistic than old Ferrum, which is more realistic than 1.0 stock, which is more realistic than 0.90 stock.
In your personal opinion, is it better to sacrifice some realism for the sake of gameplay, or do you think it should go as realistic as possible?
I think that it should sacrifice realism for gameplay. This is a game. It's meant to be fun. It's not supposed to be 100% realistic flight simulator. It's why Kerbin is small, and they have things like the real solar system to scale things up. So for the average player, especially for the average stock player, I think that 1.0 is a great improvement because it adds gameplay without making it terribly difficult or hard to wrap your head around. If you want to take the next step, that's what the mods are for things like adding in Ferrum or Deadly Reentry when that gets its update as well.
The first time you tried to get a plane off the ground in 1.0, was it radically different, or was it close to what you were expecting?
It was radically different, but it wasn't radically different because of the aerodynamics. What changed is Squad totally overhauled the way that jet engines work. In 0.90 and before, the three jet engines, the basic jet, the turbojet, and the Rapier, had their thrust output as a function of your altitude. In 0.10, or 1.0, I should say, they're still a function of your altitude, but also your speed. So if you look at the stats that are placed on the jet engines now, they'll say that they have their max thrust at a certain speed. And what's interesting is the turbojet and the Rapier especially, you have to basically push them off a cliff, and then they start to run away in terms of thrust. If you're under Mach 1, the turbojets and Rapiers don't put out a lot of thrust. At right near Mach 1, you'll probably have so much drag on your plane that it's hard to sort of push it over to like 400 meters per second. But if you do get to 400 meters per second, then the thrust increases exponentially, and you start going faster and faster and faster. This is, of course, interesting now because a new limiting factor is the heat. You can push a plane now well over Mach 3 below 3 kilometers of altitude, which is really low. But then, of course, you instantly explode and die because you heat up really, really fast, and your intakes and your nose and your cockpit all explode all at once.
Have there been any changes whenever they went to 1.0 that you have not been fond of with the aerodynamics model?
No. I really liked every single change that they made from 0.90 to 1.0 in all aspects of the game. I really like resources. I really like all the new parts. I really like the fairings. One thing that they've done that I didn't like is when 1.0 was first released, heat was a very important component for resource mining and refining. But in the 1.01 update that they just recently released, I think 2 days ago or yesterday, they removed the overheat from the drills and the ISRU, which I understand why, because it was pretty advanced mechanic. You'd have to kind of know a little bit about how it was working more than, say, the average player would probably bother. But personally, I thought it was going to be a good mechanic. But they've kind of done away with that. As far as aerodynamics, great change, personally. It might be a little annoying to people who are used to 0.90 stock aerodynamics and are used to being able to go straight up until 10 kilometers of altitude with their rockets, turn over to 45 degrees, and burn from there. That probably won't work as well as it used to. You'll probably find yourself flipping out. So that could be annoying for people who are used to the old way, but I think that if you just got the game because it was released with 1.0 and you start with this, it's a great starting point, and I think that you'll be able to handle it.
Are there any changes that you would make to it, to like anything that you would add before you would consider it a completely full aerodynamics model for just stock KSP?
I don't know 100% how the aerodynamics are modeled now. What it seems like is that they've added some of the components of old Ferrum, but not all of them. So things like, I'm not sure how wing shape affects lift, because that's an important component in wing design in Ferrum and in the real world. I think that currently stock only takes into consideration the drag produced by the wings. So if you have a really large front face, so if you have a very high wingspan craft, that'll produce a lot of drag, but it'll also produce a lot of lift. So I'm not sure how well wing shape affects lift. I'll have to look into that a little bit more before I can give you guys a straight answer for that. But I would add in that, and I wouldn't put in Mach effects. I wouldn't put in the different drags that occur when you break the sound barrier. That's a little too advanced, I think, for the stock game. But again, that's going to be in the new Ferrum. So if you want that, it should be coming. So I think that it's good to have both options available.
Well, that was going to be my last question to you. Are you going to install new FAR when it comes out?
I will. And I'm going to make the same case that I made for Deadly Reentry to people that I've been chatting with, is stock has now incorporated components of old Ferrum Aerospace and old Deadly Reentry. I want to make sure that I have a good grasp on what new stock has to offer. I want to make sure that I know what I'm doing with 1.0 thermodynamics and aerodynamics before moving on to the mods. I know that some people have decided not to play 1.0 until every single mod that they want is updated. Personally, I think that's a bit silly. I think that if you should play the base game before you mod it, or at least be familiar with the base game before you start modding it. So that's probably once Ferrum and the new Deadly Reentry are released, if at that point I feel comfortable with the stock aero and thermodynamics, then yes, I will be upgrading the both of them and seeing what they're like. And then once I've made my evaluation on both of those, then I'll decide which I'm going to actually play with going forward.
Well, I'll be looking forward to your next episode of Flight Fundamentals to see if you've made any modifications with the new game.
I have. So really quickly, I want to sort of have a live Flight Fundamentals where I amend all of my mistakes from episode 3, which was the one that was totally useless because it was released after 1.0. So in that episode, I talked about high altitude and supersonic flight. And that has been overhauled the most between both the aerodynamics and the jet engine changes. In order to fly high and fast now, the biggest barrier to that is, in fact, the heat. I was playing around with high altitude flight, and I managed to max out previously. In episode 3, I was talking about maxing out above 30 kilometers of altitude and 1,500 meters per second of speed. That is a thing of the past because I was only able to max out at about 25 kilometers of altitude and about 1,000 meters per second of speed because I couldn't go any faster. Between the fact that now, as you climb higher than about 10 or 15 kilometers of altitude, the thrust output from the Rapiers and the turbojets drop off dramatically, even as you go faster. And the fact that you can't push it too fast any lower, because then you'll burn up and die if you try and maintain those speeds with stock thermodynamics. So I would say that the new flight profile to get high and fast is you want to try and stay on a nice even climb at about a 20 degrees relative to the horizon as you come off the runway. Try and push your speed close to Mach 1 if you're having trouble getting over that 400 meters per second barrier, which seems to be the turning point for the jet engine or for the turbojets and the Rapiers, you might have to go into a little bit of a dive to pick up more speed. And then once you do, you can gradually pull up. And from there, it's very similar to what I said before. Once you kind of push the engines over the cliff, then you can pull up and slowly climb up to about 25 kilometers and up to 900 to 1,000 meters per second. If you start getting overheating, you can throttle back a little bit, or you can climb higher, or even pull up really quickly. Just that'll break you and let you bleed off some heat, get you higher altitude so that you can then level off and gain more speed again. That seems to be the new way to get really high speeds going in the new stock aerodynamics.
Listen, we'll let you go. We've got quite a few letters, some comments about 1.0 that we're going to get to, but I wanted to get your take on the aerodynamics. So thanks for joining us.
Of course, anytime.
And now your letters and the latest news in the mission briefing.
And I think it's safe to say we have quite a few letters this week. I sent out a request for people to tell us what they thought of 1.0, and we got a lot of responses. So, Nos, why don't you take the first letter?
The first one's from Acronymus. Review of 1.0 so far. I really like the update so far, especially the new aerodynamics. Although I only flew about 5 flights so far, I always lost control due to trying to turn too fast, but I always seem to be able to recover, which has a sense of satisfaction for me. That's why I finally got a drive to play Kerbal, which wasn't there for me in the previous versions. At the moment I'm playing career on normal mode, except that missing Kerbals don't respawn. I think that I got even more time into Kerbal since the update than all previous versions together. Keep control and don't turn too fast. Acronymus.
That's what Freetoss was talking about. If you go into your turns now, it slows you way down.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's kind of nice. It's like a new obstacle to try to get the hang of.
Yeah,
is the aerodynamics.
I will. This is a shout out to Amy K. She told me a long time ago, or she challenged me to use far and deadly reentry. I'm so glad that I took her up on it, because I think I would have struggled a lot more with 1.0.
Yeah,
I'm more familiar with the new aerodynamics because I had been playing.
Yeah, see, this is my first time with an aerodynamics model, and it's been kind of interesting. The word that I keep coming back to, and this is not a criticism, but the word that I come back to is unforgiving. Yeah.
1.0, the aerodynamics seem to be a lot more unforgiving.
Yeah.
Than they were.
Give you some hard lessons.
Yeah. Some hard lessons. Okay. Next letter comes to us from Joe Brock, and it says, "Hello, Kerbalcast team. Since you wanted to know what we thought about KSP 1.0, here I am writing to tell you it's far better than I had expected, and my expectations were pretty high. I'm writing just after the bug fix update, and I must say Squad repeatedly proves itself as a stand-up studio with integrity. During the weekend stream, just before the big launch, many of the streamers were saying how they hoped Squad left in the aero and thermal debug displays in the full release because it was so useful. Not only did they keep it in, but now it's a feature that doesn't even require opening the debug menu. As far as waiting until the mods are updated to play after a big update like 1.0, I think this is a bit silly. Sure, the game won't play like it did with all our mods, but how are we supposed to know exactly which mods we still want or need if we don't get the stock experience first?"
Good point.
Yeah, and that's what Freetoss was saying. "I used to have KW Rocketry installed. Now that all the engines have been rebalanced, I don't really feel like I'm missing any parts. On the other hand, it turns out I still need Kerbal Alarm Clock. Keep up the good work with the podcast and have fun on the moon." Joe,
that's for you, DK.
Yeah, that's for you, DK. Joe Brock. He's right. I have not installed KW Rocketry. The stock engines so far have been just what I need. I like the. I haven't put in Kerbal Alarm Clock yet. I like the fact that you can now click and warp on your on your orbit, on your trajectory. And so far, I haven't been missing Kerbal Alarm Clock either. Now, I may find myself in the future installing KW Rocketry and Kerbal Alarm Clock. So far, the only two mods that I've put in, I immediately put in Kerbal Engineer, and I immediately put in Procedural Fairings. Procedural Fairings is a nice mix with the stock fairings, because there are some things that Procedural Fairings do better than the stock game, and there's some things the stock game does better than the Procedural Fairings. So it's kind of a mix and match as to which one I'm going to use there. But right now, I only have two mods installed. See, next letter is you.
From Whisker Fox. So far, so good. I had observed on Monday evening that things actually looked different, and I'm playing in science mode. So starting over means I'm kind of limited on parts. It's been a long time since I played the what do I have and what can I do with it game. I'm looking forward to discovering the new parts and learning what I can do with them. I actually appreciate that you have to fly the reentry. It's like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
If you don't stay on top of it, it's going to tumble, and I lost one that way already. I left Jeb in orbit this morning with a science package that I can actually leave up there. Of course, Jeb will get to come home, but we'll see. Perhaps this time we can find new and different ways to do things, especially if we can get fuel from the Mun or Minmus. Minmus would be nice since it wouldn't take too much to get into orbit from there. More sightseeing this time. I need to find more of those anomalies and send postcards. From Whisker Fox.
That's one. I'm waiting on ScanSat to update. That's another mod that I would like to install.
Yeah.
See, next letter. Jamie T. I am loving 1.0 so far. I initially thought that it was too much of a risk, but I think Squad did a really good job on this update. That said, there are a few bugs I've noticed. Putting a heat shield on the bottom of a command pod causes it to flip to the side and burn up anyway. And a bug I sometimes had after time warping, where the craft would start rotating even when I wasn't pressing any movement keys, is happening much more often now. I hope Squad can fix these soon. Squad's been doing quite a few bug fixes. I think they've done, at the time we're recording, if I remember correctly, they've done either 2 or 3. And I think, didn't Maxmaps say that there may be another one by the time this comes out?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Next letter.
This is from Anonymous. Earlier it was a Chrononymous.
It's from who?
This from Anonymous.
Who's that?
It's redacted.
Okay.
Earlier we had a Chrononymous. Just to let you know, these are two different people.
Yeah. Expletive deleted.
So what do I think of 1.0? I love it. 1.0 is a fantastic release version, one of the best games ever created. The plans for 1.0 were exactly what they should be. A few new features, aesthetic touch-ups, bug fixes, and generally making the game feel complete. The 1.0 plans were executed fairly well, and I applaud the developers for it. But I have one criticism. It is just that the update seems rushed. They were ambitious about their release date, and they did a good on delivering an update that is on par with the rest in terms of quality. Even with the rush, most of the features were perfectly implemented, but some, like the female Kerbal's face animations and cockpit internals, are not implemented perfectly. What I mean by the cockpit internals is that some of them have places for roster prop monitor screens, but no actual screens. If you want to actually fly from the cockpit, you need to zoom in all the way to see the tiny nav ball among the useless fake screens and buttons. This is just annoying and makes everything feel less complete. What I mean by female Kerbal face animations is that sometimes they are creepy or even glitchy. Their smile can be way too wide, and their tongues and teeth sometimes come through their cheeks. But those are the only minor annoyances, and those small negatives pale in comparison to the positives. Fairings, drilling, aerodynamics, auto-warp, lady Kerbals, particle deflection, re-entry heat, cam wobble, air brakes, physics optimization, improved effects, the list goes on. With a few minor negatives that I can think of and so many positives, I highly recommend the game to anyone if you are not a gamer. As long as you are a nerd or a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, you will enjoy this game. Overall, I give it a 9.5 out of 10, only because of small things that will likely be fixed. From Anonymous.
He mentioned the small nav ball.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, and I think this will be fixed too, but have you noticed that the in terms of direction of motion, retrograde and prograde, the X on the retrograde is kind of hard to see.
Uh-huh.
The very first time I started playing 1.0, I was having a hard time telling the difference between retrograde and prograde. Mm-hmm. I can tell now, but it used to be really obvious, and now it's not quite as obvious.
Yeah.
And that may be just me. That may be just my experience, but it seems to me like retrograde is not as obvious as it used to be.
He brought up one of the features that I like the most. It's a small thing, but I forgot to mention it, is the camera wobble.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, it just makes things seem more intense.
And that's adjustable too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you can go into settings. You can adjust it to where it's not there at all, or you can adjust it to where you're going to need a motion sickness bag.
I want to do that one. I want like every RCS to like bump to just completely wobble the screen.
Well, you're sleeping on the couch anyway, so
yeah,
you can barf happily.
Yeah, there we go.
Next letter. This comes from Misha. Hey, Biff and Nos. Haven't had much time to play yet, and unlikely to get much time either, but overall, so good. So far, it looks pretty good. Yes, there are a couple of bugs, heat shields being a big one, as are the indestructible parachutes. Indestructible?
Yeah. It may have been before an update.
Okay, I was going to say, because my parachutes have been very destructible. Let's see. A couple of bugs partially vindicates those of us who were calling for a 0.95 release before going final. But regardless, any game of this scope will have some bugs, and Squad has already announced version 1.0.1 coming soon. Actually, I think as we record, I think they're already 1.0.3.
Yeah, this letter may have been pretty soon after the release.
Yeah. Getting into orbit is both easier, less delta V, and harder, more difficult to fly. Definitely. You have to be real careful on leaning over now.
Yeah.
If you lean over too soon and too far, you're going to find yourself pointing at the ground. Mm-hmm. And then pointing at the sky, and then pointing at the ground. People who have played with near or far probably won't have any trouble. Newcomers will just learn the new way straight away, but other players will struggle. Personally, I'm glad that a proper gravity turn, not the straight up to 10 kilometer then pitch over, is actually possible now. Lean slightly just after launch, turn off SAS, and let the rocket ride into orbit on its own with a nicely balanced rocket. My third launch in a stock career mode game was Orbit, and my fifth launch was a Mooner free return trajectory flyby. Returning from space requires a bit more care now. Re-entry heat is definitely an issue. In fact, heat in general is an issue. Running the atomic LVN engines creates so much heat that they blow up the fuel tanks that they are attached to. The main issue with current stock heat system is that there's no way to tell, unless using the debug menu settings, exactly what is heating up and by how much. With the Deadly Re-entry mod, right-clicking on each part showed its temperature. But in 1.0, there's no telling until things start blowing up. Well, what else do you need to know?
Yeah, that's a good enough sign.
Yeah, it blew up. Still, coming back from the Mun at plus or minus 3,000 meters per second, I had no problem deorbiting after applying the heat shield patch, Valentina's capsule. The trick is a gentle re-entry, periapsis at 20 kilometers. Okay, that's a little different than what I was saying.
Yeah.
But that's working for him. The new aero system is great. FAR lovers will probably want to install that. But for the more casual players, it offers a much better approximation of aerodynamics than the previous stock system did. I built and flew a simple plane, something I haven't really done much of, in 10 minutes, and it behaved roughly as I would expect. So it's reasonably intuitive. The landing didn't quite go as smoothly, unfortunately. Rip Jeb. Rest in peace, Jeb. The resource scanning and mining is also a great new addition to the game and adds a wonderful new aspect to it. There's some debate over the actual scanning method it uses as compared to how some of the mods did it. But overall, it's fantastic. Apart from playing around in Sandbox with it briefly, I haven't used it yet. Yet looking forward to setting up a mining outpost on the Mun. Contracts are mostly better. You get all the record ones for free for one thing. You know, you were talking, this is an aside, you were talking about in career, the milestone contracts.
Uh-huh.
I I have to imagine sitting there watching those things just, bam, bam, bam. You've got to love that.
Yeah, it's a really cool feeling when you see it's like, oh, I hit that, I hit that, and they just keep flying by, and you see the little there's a part of your heads up display or whatever that shows each time you've completed something, and you see that number ticking up, you know, and like all these little notifications. It feels pretty cool.
Do you know what I've got in my mind? And when you're playing pinball, that sound the ball makes when it hits something, like that ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
In my mind, every time a milestone ticks off, I'm hearing like ding. Ding.
That's about what it's like. You could set, if you had an achievement you were working on in Team Fortress, you could set it to ding every time you did it. So if it was like for headshots or something as a sniper, you'd just be like ding, ding, like anytime you took the shot,
They need to add a ka-ching sound.
Yeah.
Every time you hit a milestone. Ka-ching. Ka-ching. Okay, so back to the letter. Contracts are mostly better. You get all the record ones for free for one thing, but quite early on, you also get tourist contracts. That's what you were talking about, which is odd because you don't get a capsule capable of holding multiple Kerbals until quite late in the tech tree, requiring some innovative rocket building. It also offered a contract to take a tourist to Minmus when I hadn't even gotten to the Mun yet. Another issue is that due to the updated Aero, planes can't really go as high as they used to, and yet a lot of the early survey contracts require you to go higher. So you need to try and shoot at those spots with rockets, which is a bit frustrating. In the little time I've had, I've already unlocked the tech tree out to most of the 90 science nodes after only 5 or 6 launches. Money also doesn't seem to be quite as tight as in 0.90, but perhaps I've just become a better player. I've got nearly 500,000 funds, and I've upgraded the VAB, launch pad, tracking station, launch complex, and astronaut complex to the 2nd level already. That's pretty much all I've had time for so far. Waiting for some of my favorite mods to become available, but also enjoying, mostly, I have Kerbal Engineering and KAC installed, the stock game, and looking forward to my first, he says, landing or crash landing on the Mun.
Yeah.
Keep upgrading, Misha. Question.
Yeah.
He says that money doesn't seem to be quite as tight. Has that been your experience?
I feel like I do have more than I did before. It doesn't seem as tight as it was. I mean, It's kind of like he said, I don't know if I'm just more experienced with how to spend my money now, or if it is seriously, I'm just getting more of it, and it's it may not even be that I'm getting more of it. I'm just getting it faster because all those milestone contracts, it's like you're getting all the money just from launching your rocket. To where before I would have to launch a rocket and then take it apart and hopefully recover all of it and launch it again. And each time I had to build a rocket just for those little milestones, I was losing money off of fuel and parts.
That would be a hard question to answer because anybody who's familiar with 0.90, if you ask them, what do you think of money in 1.0, the question comes up, are you a better player because you've already played 0.90?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you took a new player and put them in 1.0, they don't have any reference.
Are you telling me you're going to have to get a new NOS? It's completely new to the game?
Nope. The original NOS is the only NOS there is.
Oh.
The original NOS is a classic. And you know what else? The original NOS is going to read the next letter.
And this one's from Neuronix17. Hey, NOS and Biff. Oh, he put me first, too. He knows I'm important.
That's right.
I was one of the many who thought...
classic, Coke.
I was one of the many who thought KSP was far from a 1.0 release. However, it seems that it was nothing to worry about. So far from what I've experienced, it feels very polished, even though it was pretty well polished for an alpha game to begin with. And the amount of new features is the most I can remember from a single update. There must have been a few of those that they've been sitting on for a while. Valentina is, of course, my new preferred Kerbal. Sorry, Jed.
I've been now that you have like 2 prime pilots in the game. I've been alternating.
Yeah.
When I started playing 1.0, it was like, okay, Valentina is the first Kerbal in space. Okay, Jeb is the first one around the Mun.
Yeah.
Okay, Valentina is the first one to land on the Mun. It's like I've got like this whole alternate Kerbal history
You're
going.
You're going to see some like Kerbal ego clashes.
Yeah. Well, before you had 1 prime pilot.
Yeah.
Now you've got two, so you're kind of, even though the scientist and the engineer are the same, you keep changing the pilot.
Yeah.
I maybe that's just me. I don't know. That may be just me.
I haven't played much recently, so I was expecting to be a bit rusty. What I was not expecting was that I'd completely forgotten how to build anything successfully. I lost count of the amount of times I had to revert to the VAB from stupid mistakes, and worse was the amount of mistakes I made mid-flight, resulting in pretty but painful explosion effects. I'm very slowly getting back to be able to orbit and rendezvous, even moon landings. In fact, before writing this, I managed to do a tour of the Mun and Minmus using 2 separate landers, before returning to Kerbin to be brought back down in a freshly launched ship. I've reused the landers, but I underestimated how quick the fuel would go, and, surprise, surprise, forgot the parachutes.
Have you gotten an error message during building yet?
No, I don't think I have.
I did. I built a ship, and I was just about to go to launch, and it came up and it said, you don't have any control. Because I was trying to build something automated.
Yeah. Huh.
I was, wow.
Oh, wait, no, I did see one saying you don't have any RCS, and I was like, well, I don't have it unlocked yet, but thanks.
But it's a nice touch.
Yeah, it is a nice touch, because eventually you get to the point to where you're so focused on the new things you're doing, you forget about the old basics. Yeah. So it's nice to have somebody, it's like you work with somebody who's like, hey, you kind of forgot to, bring...
There's just so many little things.
Oh, yeah.
In 1.0. And they're just all well done.
Yeah.
I can't praise 1.0 enough. I'm very happy with it.
It'll be a while before I'm back to colonizing Eve and building a Julian air dock. If it wasn't for my deterioration in skills, it'd be for the lack of needed mods being up to date yet. I'm curious to see how rough Eve landings will be now with the enhanced atmospheric systems and entry heat. They were bad enough before without the chance of blowing up. Homer to your mobile, Neuronix17. We also have an audio letter from our very own Thomas Eccles.
Hey Nos, hey Biff. How are you? Thomas Eccles back. And I'm just wondering, what is everybody's perspective on 1.0? I prefer it to 1.9. Well, it's better, obviously. But I think there are a couple of things that I needed to research that you shouldn't have to research. So, for example, when I went to do mining, I didn't know what to do or anything. I just had to go with it. So, yeah, I think the mining, like the resource gathering and things, could be a bit better. Simpler, if you know what I mean. So, yeah. Oh, Mum, step away from the soundboard, please. Thank you. But anyway, guys, I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye.
I should have never said that about She Who Must Not Be Named.
Yeah, you're asking for it now.
Everybody's just piling on. Do you know, on Twitter the other day, somebody sent me a tweet and they mentioned, I didn't catch this at first, but they actually used her Twitter address, or what do you call that?
Your Twitter handle, yeah.
Twitter handle. And they actually used that, and we kind of got this little snarky back and forth going. Mm-hmm. And after about the third or fourth one, I realized that we were dumping them all into her official Twitter stream.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, there's going to be this army of Swifties that are going to be hunting me. Yeah, they call themselves Swifties, which I don't think is very swift. But
yeah.
Anyway, I'm getting tormented because I said that I don't like She Who Must Not Be Named. I would thank Thomas for that letter. However, I'm a bit jealous. He is playing 1.9.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. It was a slip up. Honestly, how many .90 and 0.24 and
how
all
come
the
he
things?
gets to play 1.9 and we don't?
Well, I mean,
Dadgummit.
It's because he put in the audio letter.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know what it is? He's close personal friends with She Who Must Not Be Named.
Oh, yeah, it's got connections.
Well, or at least his mom.
Yeah.
She's a big fan. Thomas Eccles, thank you for the audio letter. It's always good to hear from you. Next letter, our good friend Run Phil Run. And he says, it may not be as significant of a change as aero or mining, but one of my favorite changes to 1.0 is the new cursor. It's sleek, simple, and unobtrusive. I have not noticed it, but he says, turns green on left click, brown on right click. What's not to love?
Yeah.
Who knows?
The little thing slipped by you.
I do wish that 1.0 would have shipped with a Delta V indicator, or am I reading this right? Calcal store? Calcul store in some way. And I wish there was more feedback on which, I don't know if he means indicator or calculator. I think that's a oh, you know what? I think that's you know what? That is a typo, and I have just spent like 30 seconds obsessing over a stupid typo.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Sorry. That's not Runfield Run's fault. That's mine. He says, I wish it would have shipped with a Delta V indicator or calculator in some way. And, you know, the S and the A key are right next to each other. So, and I wish there was more feedback on which parts are overheating on re-entry. Other than that, I am fully satisfied with stock KSP. There are still a few minor bugs here and there, but this is definitely a finished game and deserves 1.0 status in my opinion. Some parts I've noticed you will get an indicator as far as heating, and it just pops up. It just pops up as a rectangle, and you know you get this green indicator in it that slowly rises.
Yeah.
That's not widespread, I'm thinking. So. Calculator. Good Lord.
Calcul store.
Calcul store. Well, I figured, you know, I'm not hip to the teen, you know, the teen lingo.
They're like, oh man, check out those sweet new Calcul stores.
That's right. You know what? He's probably going to write me back and goes, no, it was Calcul store.
It's Calcul store.
You old fogey.
We're going to get a letter from Calcul store being upset.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Hey, at least it's not the army of Swifties.
Yeah.
Or the 12 monkeys.
From Death Saber. Hi, Biff and Nos. I haven't had the chance to play a lot yet. Had to skip one night for the Avengers, and life has gotten in the way of one or two others. Still, I've made some progress. After troubleshooting a bug that Kerbal Engineer Redux, my fault, not theirs, I got that working about 2 days after launch. And I haven't encountered any bugs yet, which is pretty good. I do find that the early career is much better balanced than it used to be. You no longer have to worry about overshooting contracts, which is nice, and the building upgrades seem to be coming a lot faster too. I've just finished my first MUN mission, done one put a probe into X orbit mission, and done 4 or so Taurus missions, although 3 were done in one. I've had the opportunity to play a basic jet just a bit. Man, do I love the new aerodynamics. Although for those who have never played with FAR or Deadly Reentry, I wish you luck. Reentry heating is a lot harder than I was expecting, but my problem is more with the balance of the Mark I command pod. I'm pretty sure that it's supposed to be stable going flat side first into the orbit. My pod keeps trying to flip around and go parachute first. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe the heat shields are just too light. If I'm doing something wrong, I ask the Kerbalcast community to please tell me what. Interesting thing I found out with the basic jet engine. It goes faster the lower you are now. How close to the ground you're willing to fly for a few extra meters per second. Fly safe, Death Saber. P.S. About Minmus, the gravity is so low a Kerbal can climb out of the orbiting craft, land on Minmus, do science, and then fly back to the craft without running out of fuel. I challenge both of you to try it.
That'd be an interesting little trick.
Yeah.
And you can do it since you've been to Minmus now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can do it, but I can try it.
Well, no, that's true. I don't. It's not just you as far as the about the command pod, about the Mark I. Yeah, if you don't steer it, it'll sag back. I haven't had it where it flips and tries to go parachute first, but I have had it where instead of it'll it's almost like the top. I keep saying sag because that's kind of what it's like. It's like instead of doing the perfect reentry angle that I'm used to, it actually seems to settle about 30 or 40 degrees down at the nose.
Yeah.
And so you have to manually keep yourself aligned with retrograde. Next letter. This is from John L.M. I restarted a career game for 1.0, having almost finished the tech tree in career for 0.90. Oh, well. First thing I noticed was that the record-setting contracts appear to be automatic. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. I accepted the launch a rocket contract while the Hammer was propelling Jeb on his ride. I'm assuming the name of the rocket is the Hammer.
Yeah. I'm not going to make a
Dr. Horrible reference.
Dr. Horrible reference.
Yeah. Strangely enough, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Bad horse, bad horse, bad horse, bad horse. He rides across the nation, a thoroughbred of sin. He got the application that you just sent in. It needs evaluation, so let the games begin.
Wow, I'm impressed. You could probably do the whole thing, couldn't you?
Probably.
Okay, well, don't, but you probably could, which is kind of cool.
There are people out there who have never seen Dr. Horrible sing-along blog, and they have no concept of what we're talking about.
Well, now they know the name of it. Go look it up.
It is really cool.
It's like 30 minutes of your time or something.
Joss Whedon, Neil Patrick Harris, Felicia Day, Nathan Fillion.
Mm-hmm.
What's not to love,
Yeah,
man?
there you go.
And Howard Wolowitz.
Yeah.
Yeah, moist.
Actually, yeah.
He's moist.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Which, if you've seen the show, you know that's not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
I was reading a letter. It was the hammer thing. I accepted a launch a rocket contract, and while the hammer was propelling Jeb on his ride, I was completing speed and altitude contracts. I started a strategy to convert reputation to funds, thinking I was going to be short of money, but I quickly got to 280,000 plus. That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
I'm just now trying to finish the Get to Orbit contract and realized heat shields would be nice as the first rocket burned up on its suborbital trajectory after not having enough delta V to make orbit. Oops. Next steps are to get 0.3 more science. Well, that's a very specific number.
Yeah.
He says unlock, but I think he means unlock. To unlock the BACC booster, which will be my ticket to orbit, and finish some contracts to upgrade the launch pad to level 2. I'm not going to sing again, but I will say on the last episode, do you remember we played that little snippet of music from Public Service Broadcasting?
Yeah.
I went online and got the album this past week.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty much all I've been listening to.
Yeah, I listened to it this morning.
That whole album is great.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
It's really good. If you haven't heard it, we did a link on the last episode. You can get it on. I'm doing a commercial for him, and that
yeah,
you can get it.
Do
on,
one for Nexium while you're at it.
Yeah, that's true. Nexium.
Yeah.
I could sing again.
Oh, so let's just keep it going.
Yeah. Amazon and iTunes, Public Service Broadcasting, very good album, especially if you like space history, because it's music with actual audio from space history blended in. It's really cool.
From Haywood Floyd. Hello, Biff and Nos. I haven't had much time in 1.0 yet. Still, I think KSP has really become a finished game. I'm a vanilla player, so don't have any experience with FAR. With the new aerodynamics, it seems that flying rockets is harder, but flying planes is easier, because it has become closer to how planes actually behave. The new effects, such as the shaking camera, are awesome. Improving immersion, a great deal. I was surprised to find that a tracker is now supported, and it turns out it's very well implemented. It is a head tracker, by the way. I've been using it in FSX for a few years now, I hardly ever fly without it. The only disappointment I had was the lack of new music tracks. I'm sure North Star will be yelling at me for bringing up such an issue. But probably I'm the only one who doesn't listen to Diarrhea Planet while kerbling anyway. In general, I think with the release of 1.0 KSP is a well-rounded, well-defined game that is the best of all the realistic space sims ever made. Anyone who is accusing 1.0 of not being complete should take a look at Star Citizen. It is amazing how long you can fool around with such an endless budget, not being able to deliver anything besides buggy, playable demos even after years of development. Squad have done the right thing by keeping their project clearly on focus, with the inevitable downside of keeping stuff out of the game even if it was technically feasible, and having the modding option gives anyone the opportunity to expand the game to their likes anyway. Happy recording, digressing, and mic hitting. Haywood Floyd.
I'm glad I'm not the only one struggling with letters. Hey, to keep things balanced.
You notice what I said is Squad got it right, and then I messed up. It's because I can't imagine anything saying anything after that. Squad got it right.
There you go.
And it's done. That's all you need to say.
Homeward to your mobile. Happy kerbling. Okay, I sang Bad Horse.
Uh-huh.
You have to sing Diarrhea Planet.
No.
Come on. Give us some Diarrhea Planet. Come on, sing.
No, we're not doing the
this.
sing-along podcast yet. We're going to save that one.
Come on, sing.
No.
Sing.
Quit. You have a letter. Read it.
Sing a very short snippet of Diarrhea Planet.
I'm not going to be bullied on the podcast. I'm only on a third of the time.
I'm not bullying. I'm pleading. This is my plead face.
I'm still not doing it, though. I've been doing this whole podcast sick. So I don't know if I sound different to anybody, but I feel awful. Mainly because I'm in your presence. But
oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, sing some Dr. Horrible.
Yeah. I feel a little Dr. Horrible.
Okay.
Speaking of horrible, you have to talk now.
I have to talk.
Yeah.
Wow. Being sick makes you
I'm grumpy.
obnoxious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. From Travis DC. Love the show. Been a listener since around episode 20. And remember hearing you'd like some recommendations. Oh, this ties right in. I love this.
There we go.
I remember hearing you'd like some recommendations on some tunes to jam while playing. Since 1.0 released, I figured I'd recommend some good listening while you Kerbal. The soundtrack for the game Rodina on Steam is amazing. One of the best sci-fi game soundtracks I've heard in a while. It's very epic and goes great with other games too. Also, for some good electronic music, the Cylon podcast on iTunes by DJ Loxy is great. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
He said Cylon, so I'm on board already.
My spine is glowing in anticipation.
Yes, it is. Lots of sci-fi samples and sounds mixed with other stuff, too. It can start chill and get busy.
Get busy.
Get busy one time. Waka, waka, waka. Just give it a chance to kick in, as the mixes are kind of like journeys. Hope you check this stuff out and enjoy it. If you do, please support the artists. Homer to your mobile. You asked me last week to name some people, and you caught me off guard. There was one person that I enjoy Kerbaling to, and since I was scrambling to think of examples, I completely skipped this one, and I can't believe I did. David Bowie.
Oh, yeah.
How much more perfect?
Yeah, Rocket Man, No,
that's Elton John.
Candle in the Wind.
Goof butt. Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
Rocket Man.
Benny and the Jets.
Yeah, but Benny and the Jets. Oh, you're horrible.
The next one is from Commander Stainless Steel Rat.
You know what? You need some Nexium.
Just, I don't even know what it does.
I don't either.
The commercial started and I started laughing. I don't know what it does.
I hope it makes people less obnoxious.
So CSSR says, just found the podcast while searching for some 1.0 information. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the game even though I've taken a break from the last few versions. Ready for 1.0 so I can get back into it. KSP is one of the few games that I actually feel like I had achieved something when I landed on the Mun successfully the first time and returned to Kerbin. I could only imagine the terror my Kerbals must have felt when in low Mun orbit you could actually see debris scattered across the surface of the Mun from all the previous unsuccessful attempts. Oh yes, many Kerbals died to get me to the plans of a successful mission profile. As a new listener, what is the greatest achievement in the game both of you have managed? Enjoy the show. Keep it up, Commander Stainless Steel Rat.
What's your greatest achievement?
Getting a rollie on the Mun.
I thought you were going to say going to Minmus.
No, because the Minmus, it was just a probe and I orbited the thing. But with getting a rollie on the Mun, I actually had to get something, not just a lander. Mm-hmm. But I had to land a very odd-shaped object on the Mun and get it to land fine. And the lander was attached to it, and it deployed off of it and rolled around. So it's kind of like a rover, a probe core rover. And it was like one of the neatest feeling things I did, because it was landing on the Mun, getting a probe around Minimus are things that are pretty standard on the path to exploring, but putting something stupid and ridiculous on the Mun just for the sake of the fun of it, that was a pretty good achievement. What was yours?
I would say I'm going to every planet and moon that you could land on. I did that. What's it been, a couple of months since I finished that?
Yeah, it's been about a month.
I think it took me about a year to do it, too.
Yeah.
That's my greatest achievement. I've been to every place that you can go and actually land in the game. I've been to. That just reminds me something I should have asked Maxmaps about, and I totally forgot. Do you remember Amy was talking about them adding another planet, the Saturn analog?
Yeah.
I should have asked him about that.
Oh,
I can't believe I
missed an
forgot.
Opportunity.
Yeah. If they add another planet and more moons, then obviously I'll have to revise my tour. But yeah, my greatest achievement has been the grand tour of the Kerbin solar system. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Bad horse,
Oh.
bad horse.
Really?
He drives across the nation, the thoroughbred of sin. He got the application that you just sent in.
Sing it, Nos.
I've only seen this once.
A heinous crime, a show of force, a murder would be nice, of course. Bad horse, bad horse, bad horse, bad horse. The evil league of evil is watching, so beware. The grade that you receive will be your last, we swear. So make the bad horse gleeful, or he'll make you his mare. You're saddled up, there's no recourse. Bad horse.
How many times have you watched that?
I've watched it several times, but I have the soundtrack and I listen to it constantly.
Really?
Yes.
I couldn't tell.
Bad horse.
No, stop. Okay.
Bad horse.
Okay, now stop.
Bad horse.
Bad horse.
Bad horse.
Okay.
You know, we were going pretty good for a while. Had a lot of good content. A lot of new listeners probably come in and think it's good stuff. Well, this is the real us.
Yeah.
This is what you got to love.
Well, see, the problem was I've been behaving,
Yeah. So you had to act out.
and it just the pressure has been building the whole podcast, and I finally got to this point, and I said, you know what, I can't take it.
Yeah, I got to put in some things from the musical.
I can't do it anymore. No. Bad horse. He's
We're
bad.
done. Okay, well, we're done now. We've had it.
Well, you may be done.
We feel we've had a good release. We got some letters.
I have to apologize to our listeners. Last week's After the Credits, Interstellar. Oh my God. That was the Biff Id Unleashed.
You're making it up to him by singing a song.
I guess so. No, the Interstellar After the Credits, I was listening to it later. And I mean, it was just Biff, 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 Biff. And then Amy would go, yes, but, and I'd go, no, Biff, 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 Biff. And then you'd go, hey, and I'd go, no,
Yeah.
Biff, Biff, Biff,
Just
Biff,
let
Biff.
you know I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was motor mouth last week. Anyway, I apologize. I don't know. I got revved up. Anyway, should we continue now?
Speaking of revved up, I'm revved up to hear the next letter.
And it's our last one, too. This is from North Star, who said, I asked him, because you remember he was talking about 1.0, and he was saying that he was still unconvinced
Yeah.
that they should be releasing that. Mm-hmm. I wrote him and I said, given your opinion, your pre-release opinion, I am curious what your post-release opinion is. And he said, basically he said, I am carefully considering and I'm weighing and, whatever, so I'll let you know. When I give my opinion, I want it to be fair and balanced in the whole bit. So, but he did write this one, and it kind of tickles me because part of this is we're not supposed to let anyone know that we're doing this, but he wants me to read this on the podcast. I guess that tells you how big our audience is. Not very. It's like, here, read this on your podcast.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone know.
Yeah, don't let anyone know.
North Star, greetings, Kerbalcast. Today I opened up KSP only to come across a wonderful surprise. My little, as in little 24-year-old brother, was playing KSP. He's off in God knows what part of the country, and nobody in my family really has seen or heard from him much in the past year. But tonight, I got the chance to spend some quality time watching him crash airplanes. He's better than you, Biff. He's off to a good start. Oh, thank you. Now I got North Star ganging up on me. Hey, North Star.
Bad horse.
Never mind. And giving him some pointers on how to build a stable design. I wanted to ask a small favor of you and all the listeners. I'd love you guys to all friend him on Steam. Don't tell him it was me. Shh, it's a secret. And watch him play. Give him lots of encouragement and support. He's still very new to KSP, probably at about where Nos was early in the podcast. He's crashed into the Mun a few times, but I don't think he's ever successfully landed on it. And whatever you do, unless he starts listening to the podcast and hears this, which I guess is eventually inevitable, don't tell him I sent you. His username on Steam is the N-Gauge. And let me spell that. It is, the, as in the, little n, and then capital G-A-G-E.
There you go.
The N-Gauge.
Or if you're friends with North Star, you can look through his friends and probably find it there.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, it's little n, capital G-A-G-E. Regards, North Star.
It's
Tweets.
time for the tweets.
It's time for the tweets.
Amy K. Loving Long War, and I'll be reading The Martian next, followed by Pushing Ice by All-Star Reynolds. Loving the Kerbalcast Book Club.
Did you know we have a Kerbalcast book club?
Apparently, we've got a reading list. Ascalon at InDef says, don't forget Long Mars. I'm halfway through it and loving it. The Martian will be next. Thomas Eccles says, got a new laptop and reinstalling KSP to play all night.
All night long.
Rinsloin, KSP 1.0 so far looks absolutely slick. Launch looks great. Smoke spreads out. Camera wobble. Record contracts. I love it. Orbiter says, awesome when landed. You zoom out and you can hear higher winds or at higher altitudes. Then zoom to space and the sound drops. Andrew Mason at Mason App 77. I did appreciate the jet engines drain fuel from all tanks evenly. That's going to help a lot. Chad Klaus at Simpeternity 87. So the first day of playing the release, I killed Valentina. Got flipped over on reentry and only the capsule exploded. Peter Syme, in an early bid for science, I find myself resorting to the Rolly. And he included a video on that one if you can find it. Yes, he did. Jack Kerbin at Jackadair. Max time warp on a desert from 15 kilometers.
Descent.
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking about desert. Max time warp on a descent from 15 kilometers bounces you off Kerbin 6 times before I get stopped. Mun encounter in orbit. Oops. At Mike Doling, after a few days of playing KSP 1.0, I'm convinced that it should be 0.99. Really looking forward to 1.0.1 bug fixes.
Do you know what I'm really looking forward to?
What?
The next tweet from Mike Dowling.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think there's a...
No, remember he got onto... Remember he fussed at you because you said... you just did it. You said Mike Doling. And then he wrote back and he said it's Dowling, like cow. Dow is in cow.
Yeah. So Dowling?
Dowling.
Fine,
Mike
whatever.
Dowling.
Maxmaps. Mind you, just saying Ben & Jerry's Minmus Mint Chip. Guaranteed winner. Haywood Floyd. Kerbalcast. Will there ever be an after the credits on The Big Lebowski?
Will there?
Will there?
You know, that's an idea that I've actually kind of... I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people are interested.
I think it would be kind of like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy one. It's just, what can you say that hasn't already been said about it? And without hitting the level of redundancy that The Big Lebowski jokingly hits.
Well, this is what happens when you find a stranger in the Alps.
Yeah. So, and a special thank to Jebediah Kerman at Jeb's Junkyard. He created a series of images for Kerbalcast filled with all of our favorite in-jokes.
These things are really funny.
Kerbalcast, Diarrhea Planet. Kerbalcast, But We Digress. Kerbalcast, Homer to Your Mobile, and Kerbalcast, Episode 6, it had Canadian flags in the background.
Yeah. If you want to see it, it's on our Twitter stream. He created, these are images, and he's got all this stuff in there. I was laughing my head off.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Somebody suggested that he create one where Kerbals that look like us.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I don't know what they look like. And I said, well, Walter White and Napoleon Dynamite.
According to the podcast, yeah.
Yeah. Although I revised it later and I said, me, George Clooney, you, Brad Pitt. So.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, since I'm Walter White, I took all that sweet blue meth money.
Yeah.
And I invested in some plastic surgery.
For both of our benefit.
For both of our benefit.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm the one that has to look at you. See, I can be obnoxious.
So we want to give out some thanks.
Do you know what the listeners just said? When did you stop, Biff?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do thanks.
So we want to thank our listeners and regular contributors and everyone who sent us letters, tweets, and especially audio letters. Thank you, Thomas Eccles.
Yeah. And also, we want to thank the subreddit moderators again, Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. If you will go to those websites, those subreddits, you will find a link to Kerbal Podcast right on their front page.
Episode music comes to us from Professor Soap. Look for him on Facebook or at profsoap.com.
And a big thank you to Ascalon, who posts episode every week of Kerbalcast to YouTube so that we can get the really crazy closed captioning.
If you'd like to contact us and possibly have your letter on the show, you can email us at kerbalpodcast@gmail.com or you can tweet us at Kerbalcast.
Possibly have your letter on the show?
Yeah, we only the good stuff. Which has been pretty much everything we've ever gotten.
I was going to say, yeah. we're like so desperate for content.
Not a bad letter yet. Maybe your letter could be bad enough that we won't put it on air.
That's true. How would they know, though?
I don't know, but we're probably going to get a lot of bad ones.
No, sir. I mean, if it's like if I get a delivery failed notification, I mean, I would read that letter on the show.
Yeah, delivery failed from.
Yeah. Boy, we're the most high class podcast out there, aren't we? Subscribe to us on YouTube. I did it again. 2 weeks running,
you
folks.
You can, though. You can subscribe to the...
But that's not what I meant.
I know. He meant...
2 weeks running. Wow. Okay. Subscribe to us on iTunes. And thank you to everybody who's been leaving reviews. All episodes of Kerbalcast can be found at kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com. You can also find us on Steam as Biff Aldrin and Nostromo.
If you'd like to support Kerbalcast, you can donate to patreon.com/Kerbalcast.
We did it! We survived! Yay! Okay, so let's wrap it up. That does it for episode 48 of Kerbalcast, Kerbal Space Program 1.0. Again, I would like to congratulate everybody at Squad on a job well done. Everybody there that has worked on this game, thank you so much. I have been thoroughly enjoying it, and you guys did a great job.
Yeah, a lot of hard work, and it really shows.
So I cannot praise you all enough. And good luck with the whole skydiving.
Yeah,
and
hopefully we'll hear from you soon.
I haven't seen the new Avengers yet, so yeah. I'm jealous that they're going to go get to see it. But I think it's a well-deserved ticket.
Yeah.
So, hey, you know what else Joss Whedon did?
Don't do it. Yeah.
He did Dr. Horrible.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that's it for episode 48 of Kerbalcast. I am your very obnoxious LMP, Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin. Are not feeling very well, but still very obnoxious CMP, Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
Until next time, happy Kerbaling.